the nature, because this time it is time for us to become warmer in the environment, and as people we also need to wake up, and at this time it is a good time for us to visit the nature. And today we can see we have various begonia, crabapple flower, and we have the drinks made of the fruit. For us to visit the nature, it is more than just a playing, and today we are going to share with you some of the tips for us to have those spring travel. So please stay with us for today's program, and we may teach some of the tips for you to take the photos and to share with you the techniques to memorize the beautiful things in our photos. And today I'm also very happy to invite some of the senior experts here. And they are the experts from various walks of life. And next to me is the head of the Museum of Species in the Beijing Forestry University. And she is the head of the seed station in Beijing. And next to her we have Miss Zhao from the Beijing Begonia seed station. Welcome. And for today's program we have various content, and some of that is to observe the flower, and we may also enjoy the wild vegetable, and we may also have a touch on the honey. All these activities are related to the nature. So I want to invite all of you first to share with us what we can enjoy in the interaction with the nature, and how can we perceive nature. I believe it is spring nowadays, and it is a awakening season. Therefore, this is a good opportunity for the man and nature to be both wakened up, and for us to visit this nature, to have the spring travel. We can have different feelings. Welcome. I want to express my feeling in a traditional Chinese poem, which will go like the following for the main contents. And that is for the wind. It is very soft, and it brings us with the beautiful scene. And we are so afraid that the flowers may disappear at the end of the night, so we burn the light to keep the flowers. So in this beautiful spring, we have the scent of begonia, and even at the end of the night, we want to actually observe and appreciate the beauty of the flower. I hope that all of you can go with us to appreciate the beautiful flowers and the beautiful season. And today I'm very excited for us to have a beautiful weather today. As the head of the Beijing station for the germplasm in Beijing, we have various germplasms of begonia, and under the warm sun we have the blossom of these flowers, and about 107 germplasms of flowers are blossoming. And I welcome all of you to come with us to appreciate the beauty of the flowers. And for the begonia flower, we have not only the flower but also the fruit. And we know that the day before yesterday the weather was not so good, but today the sun was so beautiful. I want to introduce to you about the weather classification for Chinese tradition. After the Qingming festival, today we say it is the 15th of April, and that is the third category of weather for us in Chinese traditional culture. And for this the 14th of April, we have the start of rainbows, and you can see the rainbows starting from today. Because in winter, we can say there are a lot of winds. And upon entering into spring, we have the rains, we have the warm environment, and we have the plants growing up, and we can see the blue sky and beautiful flowers. And at this juncture, after the small rain, we can have a rainbow in these conditions. And after the Qingming festival, this day may be the beautiful time in the year, and we choose this juncture to share with you the beauty of spring. And one of the themes is about crabapple flower or begonia. And this flower is a traditional flower that has been famous in Chinese culture. And we actually compare this flower to a goddess in the flower. And as mentioned before, there has been various poems in traditional Chinese culture to describe the flower, including how to breed and nurture this kind of begonia. And even before the spring and autumn era and the Tang and Song dynasty, we have various of poems describing begonia. Actually, in ancient China, we want to nurture this flower and we want to appreciate this beauty. And back then, I recall a Chinese poet, Kuang Tingjian. He has the line going like the following. The flower show us a hint of spring, and we can see the sun and we can feel the scent. Therefore, you are wearing the flower ring made of this flower, and we can also actually try the scent, and we can eat the fruit from this begonia crabapple tree. And in spring, we can appreciate the flower. In autumn, we can eat the fruit. And in winter, this fruit is also the food for the season birds. And in later program, we will invite the experts to elaborate on this flower. So first, we want to visit this garden and show the audience about the beautiful flowers. Now we come to the garden, and you see the first plant of the crabapple flower. So now it is in the early stage of blossom, and the white flower is not begonia. And here, if you see this way, we can see the early blossom of the crabapple flower. And now the species, the kind, is independently developed by this station, and we use an overseas source to nurture a new breed. And this is the new product with no name currently, and not long before. And sooner we will give it a name. You can see the pink petals. For the crabapple flower, for the begonia, they have various colors, and if you see this way, we can see the position of the tree was so unique. And previously we used different kind of begonia, but for this plant, it has different stretch, different gesture, and the name is Hong Yu. It was originally breeded in China, and then it went to the US, and then it went back to China. You can see the red petals and the different color of the flower. And for this plant, we are appreciating the gesture of the plant. It is like roses. And for this plant, the most outstanding character is that in autumn, the flowers will turn all into fruits, and in winter, the plant will offer the food for the birds. And now we have a board exhibiting the knowledges for the begonia, for the crabapple. So now we see the exhibition. The first is the sea of flowers, and the next is the flowers in spring. Next, the fruits in summer, and the fruits can be eaten, is edible. And here is in autumn. In autumn, we can also have the beauty. And in winter, here we can see the eyes on the fruits of the crabapple tree. And after the snow, each time we can be marveled at this beauty. And for a single plant, it can reach 7 meters in height and 5 meters in width. And if we observe from afar, we can see the beauty because we have the red color covered with the white snow. So for the crabapple tree, it has various appearances with different kind of beauty. So here, the species Dangna, a species introduced from overseas. Why we have those foreign names? Because in China, we have the original species, and these original plants exist in the wild environment. And in the traditional production area, the fruit farmer will mistake these flower trees into a different kind of trees, and to use them as the root. But the original species are not developed in the gardening sector. And for the next, we can see the overseas experts are using these for gardening.
I've heard about such a history. It was in 18th and 19th century. In the Western world, there has been hunters of plants. By that name, it means they steal those plants. Or to put it another way, they carry the overseas plants to their own nation for more plantation. So most of those plants actually originated from China. If you look at the northern China, for example, in Zhangjiakou, such varieties are widespread. And when it goes south to Hubei, Hunan, Shandong provinces, even as southern as Hainan province, such a variety is still planted there, like Donald. Why do I use the foreign names to name the flowers? Because the foreigners name them when they carry those seeds overseas. And one feature of this flower is throughout the winter time, they will still bear such fruits. You can still see the fruits hanging on the branches. And when we define such varieties in February and March, those types of trees could offer fruits for the birds. So it is functional. If you look at that fruits under there, all of those red ones are the fruits of the flowers. And in the wintertime, the birds will not eat those fruits. When it comes to February and March, when all of the food is depleted, the birds will fly here for the fruit. We were just now discussing some biological issue. Many of those begonias actually originates from China, but some foreigners take it overseas for more plantation. And now it seems like the overseas seem to have more varieties of begonia than China. In the US, it is registered that over 600 varieties of begonia is now in the US, but in China that number is 107. In southern China, we have another base of begonia. They are also cultivating such begonia. We will have more communication with the southern base. So according to your base, the varieties now stand at the number of 107. How many of the varieties are already planted in the gardens, only about 20. So we have only used about 20 of those breeds of the 600 different varieties of begonia in the world. This is called the red roof begonia. And for such a type of begonia, it is planted on a different scale in different years. And this one, it is blossoming. Begonia is quite like apples. The plantation of begonia and their blossoming have a different scale in different years. They may carry a lot of fruits, and the flowers are quite a sight in the big years, but in the small years, the fruits may not stand in a large number. So that's perhaps because in the big years, they carry too many fruits and they need to take a rest in the small years. You said that we are familiar with only about 20 varieties, and we are most familiar with the Malus micromalus. I remember that in the residence of Jixiaolan, the courtyard has planted one of those Malus micromalus, and in the residence of Song sisters, I remember seeing such begonia. So many of those historical big names had the habit of planting begonia. Exactly, the most famous one is Premier Zhou. We have remembered the name of Malus micromalus because it seems like such a variety came from Premier Zhou Enlai's old residence. Recently, we have imported some new species from the US. Those varieties coming from abroad are now only planted in the recent 10 years in China. With so many different species of begonia, why are people so favoring begonia? In terms of the colors of the flowers, it carries certain cultural intonations. In the past, the intellectuals tend to feel like such begonia trees are quite beautiful, and they seem to stand still, looking like they have a certain wills and certain principles. So that's why the intellectuals in the past really prefer flowers like begonia, and they seem to feel like they are more civilized and better educated with such a plantation of this type of flower. And such a begonia, if they are planted on a large scale, they could offer you some shady areas in the summertime, and they have different varieties with different colors, so that enriches the choice of those intellectuals. So I think that is the cultural background of begonia plantation in history. Now, could you offer us some idea about what varieties of those begonia are mostly interested by those netizens? On the different media platforms, what are the questions from our netizens? Such beautiful begonia plantation attracted a lot of netizens, and their hits on the website has been rising. And I've been paying attention to the questions by the netizens. One of them attracted my attention. He says that begonia is surely beautiful, but is there any functions of begonia other than just for a sightseeing? In our previous program, we have mentioned about the functions. The fruits could offer food for the birds. And Director Zhao, perhaps you can take this question by offering some information about the other functions of the leaves or the trunks of the tree other than just greening. Everything in the begonia tree is useful because of the colorful sight and their different varieties. It is quite functional in different ways. I usually tell everyone that among all of those trees, begonia is the most beautiful. And in addition, speaking of begonia, usually we start appreciating begonia flowers in the third stage of the Qingming period, and it could blossom until the end of April. And after the end of this period, the fruits will turn from green to red. That's the usual case for most flowers. And for begonia, one typical thing of it is the change of color of the fruits from not only green to red but also purple. If you photo such an area, you could see that some bees are flying around begonia flowers, and begonia flowers could offer you honey. Some U.S. experts have informed us of this function, and the honey from begonia is actually the first harvested honey in spring. And such local honey could boost people's immunological function. Last day, I asked some local experts about begonia. They informed me that begonia flowers do not offer honey, but now I am looking at those bees collecting such honey. Yeah, that's for sure. This year, this has been the 4th year of such begonia trees offering honey. Why are the experts telling you a different story? I think it's because the begonia trees have different varieties and they can offer different quantity of honey. For example, Malus micromalus, it doesn't offer you honey. So different varieties and species of begonia might have different answers to that question about honey. And they have different periods of flowering. In particular, such a white flower, it is more appealing to the bees because it smells so fragrant to the bees. And it tastes good. That's why the white flowers are more attractive to the bees. So for the different colors of the begonia, they also have different answers to the honey offering. And another thing is, in the same period, we can also see the lilac. It is also flowering in the same period of the begonia. What about the other species? This is Jisu Begonia because the Chinese people really favor the color of red, and it can bear such dark red flowers and red fruits. You can zoom in to look at the flowers. It's not blossoming yet, and it will bloom very soon. It is about to sprout. Are we wearing the same species of begonia? Actually, it is combined of several species. Listening to your introduction about 3 to 4 species of begonia, are there any other choices? As I said, we have different years of begonia blooming with the different quantity of fruits carrying. And this one, for example, is quite a big tree. Last year, it has been loaded with flowers last year, but this year you could see it hasn't bloomed yet. So that is the different years. And this one is called chaos. It has different petals, and it looks like the other different species of flowers. It has multiple layers of the petals, and it's quite sharp color, unlike the pink one. And it can flower for a long time of a period, from sprouting to blooming to the falling of the petals. The color remains little changed, so it quite looks stable in terms of the color. And it has been planted for over 20 years. It takes 20 years for such a tree to grow so big. Yeah, it grows quite slowly. Now let's take a look at this one. Those several trees are also quite big. It's also pink flowers. And the name of it is also the pink roof. For pink roof, how shall we appreciate the beauty of it? The petals. How can we appreciate the beauty of different petals and the pistils? Usually begonia could offer you some very clear colors of the flowers, and they are not too dark, and the colors are quite cool in the springtime. Mostly we could see the colors dominated by white or pink. I've received a question from our netizens. They say that how can we differentiate between begonia and the peach flowers? Could you give us more information, or shall we leave the question to Professor Zhang? Okay. For us laymen, it seems like begonia looks exactly the same as the peach flower or the pear flower or the apricot flowers. Now let's give the question to Professor Zhang to take the question. Since you're already here with us, the question from our netizen is, for the layman, it seems like begonia looks very much like peach flowers. How can we tell the difference between them? Actually, it's not just peach. Between peach, apricot, begonia, and pear blossoms, those several flowers are quite commonplace in springtime, and it's quite difficult for us to tell from each other. For example, begonia is one of these species. Originally, the colors and shapes of begonia have changed from history, but we can still tell the difference from the other flowers. No matter what is the species of the begonia has certain fixed colors. For example, the outer layers of the petals, it looks like pink, and inside the petals, it's more like white. As to pear blossoms, it's all white, whether from the outside or inside. Also, we have one specific species of begonia looking all white from outside and inside. If that's the case, we will look at the color of the pistils. For example, you could see the pistils here, it's yellow. For some other varieties, the pistils might change, but mostly speaking, the pistils of begonia is yellow. But for the pear blossoms, the pistils look purple-red. Remember that. That's one clue to tell between the two flowers. For the pear blossoms, also from this upward, you could see the branches very long below the flowers. But for the pear blossoms, it doesn't have such long, interesting sidelines under the flowers. And also for the small flowers, it has a very long anthocoelus.
So for pear blossoms, they do not have those pedicels. And for the pear flowers, they are on the side parts of the branch. But for the begonia, they have actually a bunch of flowers. And I want to ask one more question. For the begonia, there is one variety which the flower will stay very close to the pedicel or the branch. So what you ask, the flower is not the same as begonia, although it is called similar. So this kind of flower is a different variety of pawpaw, actually of a different fruit from the Rosaceae family. So for the flower you have mentioned, it does not have the pedicel, and we can see there are a lot of knowledge for us to know about begonia and its fruits and trees. I want to ask one more thing, because you can see the fruits and the leaves on the ground. So I will have read one article. It talked about the fallen leaves. We shall not sweep them so early. I want to, may I ask whether you can tell us about the small knowledge, the tips we need to know to protect these plants. So for a ecosystem, the plants have the cycle of growing up. They need to grow up. Actually, we have the growing up process and the falling leaf process, and then we have the seed process. After the leaves have fallen, the leaves will be corrupted by some of the microbes, and the microbes will turn the leaves into organisms, and these leaves will become the nutrients for the roots, and the roots will take these nutrients to support the plants. Although we can see it is a very important process in the management of ecosystem as well as in the forestry system, the key issue is to keep some of the leaves on the ground. If we sweep all the leaves, we can see the bare soil, and that is not good. We shall not leave the soil bare. If we dig deeper, we can see the wet soil. But if we keep the soil bare, due to the sunlight or evaporation, we can see the soil become very dry. We should keep the leaves on the ground. As long as we sweep the leaves, the soil will be dry. And if the soil is dry, we can have, say, the sandstorms. If we keep the leaves due to the humid environment, the roots will gain more nutrients. And we can see the leaves on the ground will be corrupted by the microbes. Microbes will become the organic elements, and these elements will become a layer of black elements, and this soil is a very important part for the nutrients of plants. And in some communities, we have the grassland, but if we do not water the grassland, it will turn dry and become very ugly. It is not like what we see from the wild environment. Is it a thing we need to pay attention to? That is a wild plants in the nature. Whether it is a good part of the ecosystem. We can see at important junctures these wild grasses. They are necessary for us to support the plants we want to use or want to nurture. But if we try to plant the artificial grassland, it depends on the soil. If the soil is not so rich in the nutrients, if we do not water the grassland, the soil will become so blocked. And there are other reasons because we have chosen the different variety of plants. And for the local varieties, these are the varieties we nurture for tens or hundreds of thousands of years. So can you introduce about the local varieties? Can you introduce about them? So in the urban rural areas, we have on-the-ground varieties. We should keep the roots in the ground. And this is an important plant, and it has various roots. That is deadline, and it has the roots. If we take the roots out, it would harm the soil and influence the whole environment, and it will become not so rich in nutrients. If we want to have a grassland, we shall not remove the roots of those wild vegetables, wild grasses. We need to remove some of the wild plants, but we just cut it, not remove the whole roots, because it helps to maintain the nutrients in the ground. And for the dandelion, it tastes bitter, and it is of the cold nature. If you eat more, it is not good for your health. If you are visiting the countryside, you may have a taste, but you cannot eat too much. And we can say that our ancestors have selected those very tasty foods for us, and those wild plants, they may not be as tasty as what we use normally, and we just want to appreciate the beauty. And some of the wild plants may be used for TCM. And for this one, it is not edible. You cannot eat it. And it is commonly seen in the countryside or next to the roads. And it has a high requirement for the soil. We need to have the humid environment and a good soil to have this kind of herbs. And we can see that in our daily community, in our apartments, we shall not have this kind of plants, because in the urban community we may remove these plants. And for here, it is the hui herb, and it is a small plant. It is a kind of famous wild vegetable, and after it grows up, we can cover it with flour, and we can steam it. And it is edible with no special taste or no strange taste. And here we have 茜草, another kind of wild vegetable. It is difficult for us to tell because they are all green. And we have different kind of leaves. And if you touch it, you can feel the sense that it is not smooth for you to feel it. And it is not edible. You cannot eat it. And for the wild plants which people want to eat, the famous is about the shepherd's purse. And over there we can see the shepherd's purse, and here we have a kind of vegetable. You can also eat it. It is fenghua vegetable with a yellow flower. It is similar to the common vegetables, and it tastes spicy, not so tasty. So this vegetable is like oilseed rape. It is of the same variety. And there are another kind of wild vegetable here. It is dandelion. It is easy to recognize. You can see the leaves are like arrows. And and here it is ma vegetable. It is edible by the people. And the roots are very big. If you remove the vegetable, the roots may stay in the soil and it will grow again. Therefore, if you visit the countryside, you can see the vegetable and eat it. Here it is the nihu vegetable. And I want to now let's see the questions from the netizens. And I've been paying attention to your questions, and the questions focus on the key point, how to tell those wild vegetables whether they have the toxicity or whether they have the residue from the pesticides. So for the pesticides, they may exist only in the farmlands. The pesticides residue, we talk about the residue of pesticides, and the other kind is the agricultural chemical to herbicide, okay, to remove the herbs. Okay. So please do not go to the artificial environment to find some of the wild vegetable. So if you want to get some wild vegetable, you may need to figure out whether there are the residue of agricultural chemicals. Therefore, I think it is better for us not to pick the wild vegetable at our will. But for the common people, we do not have the ability to tell. So we cannot know whether it has the residue of the agricultural chemicals. We cannot see from our own eye. We need the special equipment and facilities. And I do think we shall refrain from picking up the wild vegetables in the countryside. And furthermore, like what you can see from this garden, they do not use the herbicide or the pesticide. They want to. So if you go to such a base like this one we are in, you can see and analyze the ecosystem. So if we have various kind of wild herbs, the primitive environment, maybe they do not have so much residue of the agricultural chemical. But if you see the ecosystem, if the system has the sign of artificial interference with not any wild herbs. And I want to share with you how to recognize dandelion. And we can see the bunch of the leaves and the yellow flower. And for this, they have the liquids as the roots. And for if it has this liquids on the milk on the root, they can be eaten. And some may not recognize this. They look similar. Therefore, you need to judge whether they have the milk as a root. It can be eaten. It is dandelion. And for the plant with the milk, they can be eaten. And without the milk, without the latex, it cannot be eaten. And if you cannot see clearly, if you remove it from the ground, if it pull the plant from the soil, you can see clearly the milk here.
刚才张教授呢给我们介绍了这个各种的野菜，其实呢，但是他说到了就是。
Just now, Professor Zhang has briefed us on different types of the edible wild herbs, and his suggestion is we shall not randomly go outside and pick those wild herbs. We need to have such an ability to tell the difference between different herbs so as to guarantee our health. Another point is we shall not pull the roots out of such a ground as a whole. We shall leave the roots there so that in the next year it will grow again. And another point is we shall not pick all of those plantations around one specific area to expose the land. We shall pay attention to those three suggestions. And today, in the forest areas or the botanical gardens like Begonia, I'm also going to introduce to you more about nutrition of those plants. In the springtime, when we visit the gardens, is there going to be some good functions of those plants to our mental health? You can feel that benefits everywhere you go if you visit the gardens. For example, the Begonia gardens. there will be some biological response to such activity. For example, our immune system. And there are two sides of this function. Biologically speaking, if we eat the roots of the dandelions, it will have some good function in fighting against cancer, for example, breast cancer for the women. If we eat the other plants, for example, the mint leaves, it will also have some good effects in terms of boosting our sleep results. And for those types of vegetations, is there any such plants in this area? Actually, no, but I'm just giving you some examples to tell you that if you visit such gardens, you can enjoy such benefits. Even if you plant those vegetables or plants in your own balcony, you can also enjoy the benefits of those plants. You don't have to go outing for such a visit. Another example is the rosemary. Rosemary will prove quite useful for you to avoid losing your hair. So if you plant such fragrant flowers and plants, they will usually be quite functional and useful. For example, they may have some vaporizing smell. If you plant those flowers in your balcony, you will feel quite good about it. So by that you mean every variety of the plants will be quite useful and beneficial for our health. It's just your choice. The simplest way is to put such a plantation in our balcony or on our office desk. We can carry them around us so as to make us feel good. Like I said, such benefits are everywhere around us. It's not like what you imagined. You need to find such a botanist or such an expert to help you enjoy the benefits of the plants. Another question on behalf of the young people is, since mostly we are living in the city and sometimes we have a sleep problem or we might feel anxious or even depressed, so for those type of youngsters, what type of plants shall we have? You shall plant those vegetables or plantations that can help you relax. For example, you can choose lavender. You can even buy some lavender-filled pillows. Or you can drink the mint water. You can just put one leaf of mint into your water, and also the other type of plants will also do the same thing. What type of plants could help to improve our mood? Speaking of the smell, for those plants that can send out good smells, they will be quite beneficial for your mood. And as to the touch, also we have those type of plants. For example, one of those look like the ears of the sheep, and if you touch it, it's quite soft. So if you plant such plants that feels quite good when you touch it, they can also help to boost your mood. Thank you for your answer. Just now, listening to the introduction about the different plants, it might be quite enlightening in our daily lives. So many bees flying around in this garden. Just now, when we look at those begonia trees, we have already seen such bees bustling around. Is this the honey season? I don't dare to come closer to the bees. Could you come to me? It certainly bites people. Shall we stand here, keeping a distance from the bees? Okay. Is this the honey season? Now it's just starting to flower. Basically, we have to wait until the end of the flowering season for honey harvesting. So this is the begonia honey, right? What's the benefits of the begonia honey, and what's the difference of it between begonia honey and the other honeys? Only we have such a large offering of begonia trees. For the other gardens, they have only limited areas of begonia trees. So mostly the bees will come to our garden for begonia honey. Can we take a closer look at how the bees do the job? The photographer perhaps need to come closer.
好，现在我们请这个张志祥教授再给我们讲解一下，就是在这个花园里，或者说这种这个园林里边有这种蜜蜂多一点，对我们这个整个生态链条它起到什么样一个作用
？When the bees are paying visits in a large number, what's the role of the bees in our entire ecological chain? The bees are playing the role of a carrier. It actually could send out such flowers, and sometimes those flowers, farina, could be carried by the bees.
好像在头后面刚才正要遮。
它那个如果是自己授粉，它是不会发育的，我们叫自交不孕。
Some flowers are infertile, but if the flowers are fertile or infertile, the bees could play certain roles. Sometimes they need such a hybridation, and for such a hybrid to happen, they need a carrier. And for Begonia is one typical example of such a situation, needing the role of the bees to do the job. You could see the base area of the pistils, there will be some part looking transparent. That is the pollens. And the bee's job is to pick those pollens. And when they are picking the pollens, for example, on the rear legs of the bees, those yellow parts are actually the pollens they carried from the flowers. So mainly the job of the bees in the ecological chain is to carry on such pollens of the flowers and send it somewhere else. Many of those flowers need such a carrier to do the job, because those flowers may not do the job on their own. Otherwise, without such carriers to play its function, they will not grow or reproduce and bear fruits later. So that is one interesting phenomenon in the nature, and bees are quite busy in the nature. And the plants usually need coordination. They require the job of the bees to make happen. For such media and carriers, they are the insects. Some flowers require a certain species of the insects to be such media, and bee is one of them. Now let's look at this flower here. This is usually where the bees go to pick up the bottom area of the pistils. It's not just the upper areas of the pistil, but the bottom area. Could we zoom in? It's not the yellow part, but rather the bottom end of the pistils. There will be some excretes of the pistils. And that's mostly the honey. And when the bees come to pick the honey, they will carry the pollens alongside the honey. And when they fly over, they will drop those pollens to the ground, and maybe that is where the trees reproduce or flowers reproduce. So when we have the bees around us, the entire environment is facing a very good ecological condition. Yes. I used to watch some TV program. Those workers in the farmland could use some certain tools to do such a job of pollens. Yes, the most natural way is to rely on the media, like the bees or the other types of insects. For example, butterflies, flies, and bees. Now, I also want to mention that this is an entire ecological chain. And when we are using the pesticides, that's a very bad thing because it might kill the bees. So we need to avoid the role of the manpower in the farmland. So my suggestion is the most natural way is usually the best choice. Sometimes, whenever we have such a natural choice, we shall go through that resort rather than such artificial choices like pesticide. Thank you for your suggestion. I think with today's promotion of science about such plants, people will have better understanding about nature, and in the future, in the agriculture area, there might be some change of behavior. Let's look forward to that. In the beginning of our program, I've mentioned that in the springtime, we need to have the full benefits of spring. How shall we take the most beautiful photos of the springtime in order to leave our memory behind? I could see you are taking photos. Are you from the Photography Association of China? Yes. What are you photographing? Flowers. There are birds and flowers today. Can I take the photos? For example, those are some of the small flowers. Because of the sunlight is not quite clear from my angle. Very nice. Any others? Are you just choosing partial branches of those flower trees? Yes. I think photography could change our sight or view about those nature. When we are taking photos of flowers, we need to look more closely at those flowers. And our way of expressing the beauty of flowers is quite different from the usual situation. How can you produce very good works about those scenery? Since now is the flowering season, everyone seems to be taking photos of flowers. And for the professionals, they will take photos of the flowers that do not look exactly as the flowers. It seems like those photos could change our views about flowers. They look quite dreamy. And through our sight, we may not think of a dreamy picture about flowers when we are on the scene, but through the professional's job, we could create such a scenario with the dreamy situation of the flowers. And we might take photos from different angles from the common people. And also, secondly, through the cameras, we could use some specific ways to show the details of the flowers. For example, when I look at the flowers, it's just one or two petals. How shall we choose the best angle or the best flower among all of those flowers? We might find those with some special features.
So we need to express the essence of the flowers. So you can find the most unique flower on that branch. Why it is good? Because if you take a photo, you can have a different feeling. And if you can see, it is not the same as what you see on the whole scene. And this branch you can see here. If you take this angle, you can see the light and the shadow, different kind of light and shadow. If you go against the natural light, you can have a different perception with a different image. And you can also take the bee, so we can have a more fantastic scene. If you just look at the whole plant, it is not such a detailed angle. You need to make the right choice. You need to have a taste of the beauty, and you need to take the angle of a professional photographer. And if you perceive the flower as a whole plant, you cannot see the beauty. But if you can appreciate the backlighting, the posture, the gesture, you can see the details. And what are the other skills? If you have the different angle, if you take a look, if you look upward, you have a low angle shot. It is different from what you see if you take another angle. And if you change the focus, if you make it nearer, you can have a different perception. And if you take away the branch, you can use the sky as a background, and you can take a low angle, and you can use the background to support the outstanding beauty of the flower. So this is what we usually take. Okay, Uncle, you take the flower here. You like photography? Yeah, I like so much. And what flowers? What have you taken? So have you taken any flower picture? So although you are at a senior age, you have your joy in taking the pictures. I want to share. May I see what you have taken? You are taking the pictures of people seeing the flower. So actually we are in the camera. Do you take any pictures of only flowers? I want to take a full scene, so may I ask, after seeing the begonia, what do you feel? I think these flowers are so beautiful, but the begonia are at the early stage. After a few days, they may be better, and for the whole period, you can take pictures for a lot of time. And I have one remaining question on behalf of the netizens. How can we take selfies, or how can we look better if we take pictures with flowers? Okay, because flowers are so beautiful. If you take pictures with the flowers, how to look beautiful, more beautiful. So for take pictures of the persons, we need to focus on the people instead of the flower. And we first need to choose the right background. And we need to link the people to the flowers through various techniques. And what is more important is that we need to have a coordinated relationship between the people who take the picture and people who are photographed. And if we use a camera, it is different like what we see actually. And by choosing a different angle, by choosing a different background, by choosing whether these things, the flowers, what kind of flowers we are choosing, and whether we want to make the flowers look blurred as the background. Is it a good technique? How can we some of the technique, we take the person as the focus with a blurred flower. Sometimes we take very clear flowers with blurred person. So maybe we can also take a different technique. If we take photos of birds, it may be more difficult. We need to wait for some time. And for the photos of the birds, it depends on what the birds come to this scene for. Some of the birds come to find food, or some birds, they grow here. And if you take photos of the birds, we have various photos. And they look very beautiful. So this is a specific kind of birds. And the bird is called hoopoe. And these are the worms the bird is eating. So this picture is the older bird trying to feed the younger bird, and now you can also see these other kind of birds. Because for the forest, they have a whole ecosystem with worms, birds, and bees. They live harmoniously together. And various foreign people, they come here to take the photos of the birds. And in Beijing, a lot of people try to take photos of birds. I am an amateur. I do not focus on this, but various people, they specialize in taking the birds picture. And this is very beautiful. The birds fly here. They are eating the worms. Okay, the birds, they want to take the worm and to feed the younger one, the smaller bird. And without birds in the forests, we may have a disaster of various worms. And in the nature, we have the natural balance between the birds and the worms. We need to have the worms, and the worms are also checked and balanced by the birds. Okay, thank you. And we will continue our visit, and you may stay here to have more beautiful photos. Ms. Zhao, we have mentioned the issue of birds. And we see that begonia fruit offer the food for the birds, and for birds they also eat worms. So without birds, it may be so frightening. So what are the situations for the birds in your garden? And for each season, we have various varieties of birds. I do not specialize in this. And I know we have various kinds of varieties like magpie and other kinds of birds. So you can see in this space various varieties of birds, and so these fruits are half eaten by the birds, and these fruits, they want to eat the seeds, not the fruit, the whole fruit. So why we want to attract the birds, because the birds can take the seeds to other places. Therefore, it is a very good help to the ecological rehabilitation. And for begonia, the fruit is unique. It has two parts. From the end of autumn to the early stage of spring, birds does not have enough food. And for begonia, it offers the food during this period to the birds, including the monsoon birds as well as the local birds. Because for the begonia fruit, it becomes mature from August to the end of the year. Therefore, for the birds, they can have a continuous supply of food thanks to begonia plant. And for some of the gardens, they use agricultural chemicals. And under these circumstances, with agricultural chemicals, will the bird come to these gardens? So for some of the gardens, if they use agricultural chemicals, they cannot see any birds. And for today, the sun is beautiful. We have a lot of people, so the birds are far away. But in ordinary days, in working days, we can see an orchestra of the birds. And with birds, the worms are reduced by the worms. Some of the birds, they want to eat the worms. And some of the birds, they want to eat the fruits. Some of the birds, they want to eat the honey. They have different habits. And for here, we have a good activity enjoyed by the children. We use the juice of the begonia fruit. We use a branch of begonia. We use it to make plant exhibition. And I will give the chance to Mr. Zhao to share with us how we can use the natural plant for the dyeing process. Now we use the branch of the begonia to make it a dyeing element.
你这是在干什么？这是什么？能不能拎出来看一下？
要不要再系紧点？
So we are using
它原来是什么颜色的呀？
begonia.
原来是不是这个颜色？是吧？
傻了。
To dye the cloth, the original color is
能不能简单给我们介绍一下这个？就是你们是利用什么样的植物来做这种植物染？还有我们普通的人在家里能不能做？
当然可以，就是我们这个植物染呢，其实植物的颜色是特别丰富的，就是各种各样的颜色都有。我们今天呢是以海棠这个为主的，做一个这个植物染色。然后就是像我们这个花瓣呢，海棠的花瓣它也可以做色彩，就是我们用布给它包好了，然后在里面煮出来。然后看我们小朋友 这个做的这个染色，这个提取出来的颜色都是我们这个海棠那个树枝儿提取出来的，就是像这样的枝条、叶子都可以做这个颜色。
So the color is from the branch of the begonia, from the leaves of the begonia,
根据就是不同的布料，就是我们有那个棉的，有丝的，有那个羊毛的，出来的颜色色彩它是不一样的。
We need to adapt to different kind of cloth, say the silk, the wool, and cotton.
然后我们还可以做一个就是以花的这个为主的，
Therefore the color
我们
is
可以把花
yellow.
瓣放到一块干的那个布料上面，
And
我们可
we
以这
can
样一层一
also
层那个
use
包
the
裹，
flowers.
这样给它压平了。
Use the flower petals to put it on a dry cloth. We can cover it one layer after the
这样之
other.
后呢，我们就可以拿个棍，这样裹起来，就是这样的颜色也是特别丰富的。
And after
然后我
that,
们在裹的时候，
we
我
can use
们
a
不断的
stick
往里边加这个海棠的花瓣进去。
哦，
to fold for another
带点颜色。
time.
带点颜色
And
进去。
during this process, we add the petals of begonia. We add the petals with color.
之后呢，我们就用麻绳给它绑紧了。
哦，麻绳绑。
对对对，麻绳绑紧，这个在家里操作都很方便，就是
And then
不光是海棠花，
we use
就是我们在野外呀
a
采的那些
rope
花
to
都
tie
可以。
And it is very convenient. You can use begonia, but you can use other
这
kind
样
of
绑紧之
flowers
后呢，
if
我
we
们就
can
是
pick it
放到那个盆子里
in
面，
the
就是
wild.
也是里边盆里也是放一些，就是我们刚才包裹的一些花，不同颜色，就是五颜六色的花
And
都可以
we。
然后我们进行熬煮，
treat
就是
it
大概是
in
大
a
火
basin
30分钟，小火然后20分钟，然后
We
再小一点的
use the
火
flowers
15
of
分钟之后
various
我们就可以拿
colors
出来
and we boil it for about 30 or
对对对，
20
还得加
minutes.
热。然后我那儿有个成品，就是我
For 30 minutes in very large, in very big fire, and for middle fire 20 minutes, and for very small fire 15 minutes. And we have the cloth that has already been dyed, and we can
就是它
see
是这样
the
的，就是
final
包裹，就
product
是
we
刚才
come
这样的
here.
方法。然后它这是也是很好看的
就是像那
研究色。
种有
So
点
this
像
is what
我
we
们买过的那种
dyed.
印
We
染。
use
对
the
对对
color
对
from
就
the
是
flowers.
它里
They
边
look
染料的
beautiful.
那种感觉。
It is like what we
对
have
是
bought
花的那
in
种。
the market
像这种呢，我们可以就是
using the
用个相
artificial
框做背
dyeing
景，然后放在墙
elements.
上做装饰，它是也是一个很好的
So
一个方
we
式。
have the natural color from the flowers. You can
纯羊毛染
have
出来
a
的
frame
这个是
可以染出
to
这么多
put
颜
it
色。
on the wall
这都
as
是
a
我们天然的
decoration
对对，
for
天然的植
our
物染出来的
apartment.
这是我们海
And
棠
here
植
we
染出来的黄色，
use
是
the
特别好
wool
看、特别亮的一个
to
颜色。
have the dyeing process.
海棠
So
对对对，
this
羊
dyeing
毛
process
的
is finished
色
through
彩，它
a
和那个
natural
它
element.
是有差别的。
And the
哎，我想问个问题，您看
We
这个
use
黄
the
色和绿
juice
色，
of
咱们在
begonia
森林里边
fruit
都能常
to
看
dye
到。
the
你染
wool.
出这个颜色，我不足为奇。那那种蓝色
And
是怎么
for
染
yellow
的？
and green, they are common in the
它
forest.
那个枝叶就是染出来
But
的。对，
for
就是
the blue one, how can we achieve
它
this?
是染出
For
来
the
它是一
blue
种
one,
蓝色的，
it is
就是我
from a
们染的时候，
fruit.
它的果子出来的
And
枝叶它是
So
紫色的，但
it
是我
is
们染出来
from
之
a
后
kind of pear for this color.
那就是我们可以自己动手用这些
They look
枝枝叶
purple, but
叶，
when
然
we
后做
wash
手
it
帕，
with our
这个就很好。
对，这个就是我们
procedure, it will
就
look
是
more
脱
like
挑
blue.
脱染，
So
就是我们把
with
那
the
个
different
叶
leaves
脉好一点的
and
叶子，
flowers
就是放在这
and
上面，
fruits,
用
we can
用
make
石头给它慢慢敲，
different
把它那个叶绿素给它敲出来之后，它
handkerchiefs
就
of
成
the
叶子
other
的形状，就可以在手帕上展现。
looking more beautiful. We
然
may
后这
use
种就是
this
扎染，
stone
扎染呢就是说我们可以就是
to
说
knock
不同的
on
形状，
these
我们就是
fruits
随意，
so
就是
that
很随意，把每
finally
个
the
地方用绳子绑起来。
这个地方是先
The
扎起来，
chlorophyll will be
再
squeezed
去染
out and it will
然后就
look
变
more
成这样的一
green.
个花色。
And sometimes we use the ropes
然后这个渐变的颜
to
色呢，就是
stick
我们就是
the
先把下边放到
tapestries or
洗
handkerchiefs
洗
together
色，
so
就是
that
很深的地
when
方，
we
然后
spread
慢
it
慢
out
慢的
again,
渐变染。
渐变，对对对
relieving
渐变
such ropes, it will
所
look
以
like
各位网
a
友，如果有
certain
兴趣的
shape.
话，你们可以到这个
And
森
for
林里
this
去捡点
gradual
这个
color
枝条，
change, it's
稍加
also
调
going
试和
through
蒸煮，
certain
是吧？
procedures
但是这个还是有一
with
套方法的
different
哈，
colors
还要
and
加一些添加
different
剂，是吧？
areas of
我们可以
such
加一些就是明矾，是我们是一个中药，
tapestry.
一个
And
成分
also,
我们
if you
上
have
药店
certain
都可以去买
flowers
的这种
and
明矾。
certain
好的。
materials,
怎么
you
加
could
呢？
do
就
this
是
on
明
your
矾是我
own.
们这个植物，就是我们要
For
染这个布料的
example, we may
3%，
go
就可以了。
to the drugstore
一
to
定要
buy
记住
the
是
white
3%哈，
alum.
别加多了。所以说你可以亲自动手制作一个
You
手帕
use
或者围巾
alum， taking about 3% of the total materials, and then the alum will allow your handkerchiefs or scarves to look more yellow. It's quite environmental friendly and it's natural, and if you do this on your own, it looks quite good. And those kids are enjoying this process. Professor Zhang, we have been mentioning a lot about the leaves and the branches and fruits of the plants. All could be useful for us. They could offer us a lot. Exactly. As a forest ecology, whether in the growth period of the plants or the other seasons like the roots or the other parts like the fallen leaves, all of those parts of the plantation are an integral part of the forest system, and they are quite useful for us. Even though here in the base it's mostly planted with begonia, but I have to say that in any garden it is consisted of an entire ecological chain. When it's the flowering season, it offers us with different colors, and then we can use the flowers for dyeing, and such dyeing it could offer us different colors like yellow or green, and mostly we could use the anthocyanin as the basic material and component. So after the flowering season, the color of the flower could be maintained with us by using such a dyeing procedure, and also after the flowering season we can use the fruits, and the fallen leaves could also be returned to the nature in a specific way for another round of cycling. And for the trees, we have different types of trees. For example, the bushes, the arbors. So it's quite a natural combination. We cannot, for example, take away all of these weeds or the grasses below around the bush clusters. We need to allow the different species of the trees to coexist. That's the best way for the nature preservation. Today we've listened a lot about nature in such an interesting outing, and finally, before our program ends, I want to tell our netizens that while we already have some idea about nature, our understanding of the nature will be more profound and in-depth. Only when that happens can we respect nature and adapt to nature, thus protecting nature. So for the next step, we will need to better respect our nature and love it in our way, so that our blue sky and mountains and other scenery could be better preserved for our descendants. Finally, I have to say that nature is the greatest teacher of mankind. Let us protect nature and embrace nature in the springtime. That's all for today's program. Thank you for staying with us.